Okay, so last time we were together, Stuart, we were talking about lifestyle and capital businesses and what are some of the similarities and what are the differences in terms of how you might think, how you might act, how you might make decisions based on which one of those routes was most favourable to you. One of the things that you're really passionate about is this concept of a strategic orbit. And I think that you believe that that is an exercise that is of value, whether it's a capital or a lifestyle business that you want to undertake. And you might describe it differently to me, but the way I would describe it is it's about zooming out. Because often we talk to clients about what's happening this year or this month, the rest of this year, but the strategic orbit is designed to get them to lift their head above the parapet, think about the long-term horizon and what kind of business are we building and what are some of the spokes, if you like, of that business plan. So talk to us about what the strategic orbit is and what it helps businesses to think about and to do.
Okay, I'd like to go back a step and say, let's understand the role of it in terms of my view on strategy. My view on strategy is quite simple. If you take the Oxford English Dictionary, it will tell you that it's a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term aim. So that's maybe where your zooming out says. We're very keen on annual budgets, but this really is about looking a little bit further. I describe it as a tool to map out what does that journey look like. I like to use 3-year plans for that reason, and we'll talk maybe later about the concept of 3-1-90. But for me, it's something that just allows you to, even if it's scribble down on a piece of paper, you can refine it and make it look pretty later. But scribble down some steps where you want to get to. It's a tool to help you visualise your ambition and your goals.
And you mentioned 3 years there is your usual, I guess, default time period. Where does that come from? Why 3 years?
It's on the back of a model. There is a well-known American model that they used to call 3-1-Q. Lots of people use today 3-1. Those people who have used OKRs or anything like that, it's looking at something on 90-day cycles. So what do you need to achieve in the next 90 days to get you towards this longer-term goal? I think anything past 3 years is pretty much sort of vision, really. I know lots of people like the big, hairy, audacious goal, the Collins piece or whatever. But for me, 3 years is quite sensible if we take year one as the budget that we've got now, to use maybe a mapped parlance, it's like doing a loose 3-year budget, Paul. I just think it's a sensible way of putting your head above the parapet, looking forward, but not being too distant.
Okay, excellent. And so talk us through the strategic orbit then. What is the pillars? Is there segments, areas? What is it other than a wheel and an orbit? What are some of the categories and the labels within it?
Lots of people look differently, Paul. Lots of people see it as a web, spider's web. Lots of people see it as a clock face. Me personally, I love to look at it as a radar screen, which is, we've all seen the films where the guys sat and look at the radar screen and the little thing goes round and obstacles blip. That's how my brain sort of got to like it first. But if you think of a clock face, if you take 12 o'clock all the way around, I like to cut it into 11 segments and have those segments generically linked to areas of any business. So yes, you can personalize it within that, but I have specific segments. I have it split into 4 quarters, if this is a worthwhile explanation. Those quarters are the 12 to 3 o'clock is planning, the 3 to 6 o'clock is your process, the 6 to 9 o'clock is your people, and then your 9 to 12 o'clock is your performance. And within it, all of those quarters, there's different segments.
Super. So would it be helpful for you to talk us through each of those 4 then? And what each of them involve and why?
Yeah. So the planning piece for me, which is the first quarter, breaks down into 3 segments. Your first one is vision. Your second one is what I just spoke about a minute ago, 3-1-90. And your third one is personal aspirations and goals. I put those things in, Paul, because I believe you and I have spoken many times, both in content like this, but also in our own sort of planning work with MAP, that vision and values are everything. To be able to succeed in your business, I think you've got to be really clear on that. So for me, the number one, the start is the vision. What is your vision? Where do you want to get to? So why do you even need any plan, let alone this plan? Where are you trying to get to? And that does form part of helping somebody understand, am I looking at a lifestyle-focused business or am I looking at a capital event-focused business? So the vision and the values is the first piece. Second piece is 90, And that to me is just a very simple thing that says, if we want to be somewhere in 3 years' time, what does this year's financial budget need to be? And in all of these sectors, I'll come back to it later, can we find a 90-day objective, a 90-day aim, something that we can hold ourselves accountable for, to are we making sufficient progress along the journey? The reason I'm biased about that, Paul, is lots of people put budgets together. We see it where someone puts a budget together, and unless you're constantly reviewing that budget in a whatever cadence works for you as the owner or the management team, then it's too easy to halfway through the year find out that you are in the dressing rooms 3-0 down at half time and not sure how you're going to get it back. So I think the 3-1-90 allows people to have a sensible, to use your phrase, zoom out, a sensible look at the business. The third one, the personal aspirations, Paul, I just think this is where really the nub of this comes down. What is it you're trying to do? And where, this would match to potentially, we've spoken passionately about why getting some financial planning involved helps. What is it you're trying to do? What does this number need to be for you? And that sometimes helps people then decide whether it's capital or whether it's lifestyle. If your business can give you what you need to live the life you want, then brilliant. And that might be what you want to do for 5 years, 10 years longer. You might look at it and go, I'm going to make sacrifices to get a certain capital sum to allow me to exit this and go and do something else. So the personal aspirations bit is really important for me. It then links back to that vision. Are those things aligned? Because if what you're telling people you want to do is not really what you want to achieve, then you've got to challenge yourself on what have you got this business for.
Brilliant. That makes a lot of sense, and how those things tie together as part of the planning piece. Just give us an example of, with the vision, what would year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3 look like, just so that we can help to visualize it. Because most people, when they have a vision, it's something that's in the distance and it's one thing. But how would you break down a vision over 3 years, or what would be an example of that?
Honest answer, Paul, I wouldn't. I think the vision is that end of the journey piece. I think the vision is, what does this business look like in 3 years' time? So again, if you anchor it back to 3-1-90, it says if you want to be, let's just use a lifestyle business example. If you want to be extracting £150,000 a year out of this business, then the business needs to be making a certain amount of money. And that what you might then bring it back to is, okay, year 1 it's 50 grand, year 2 it's 100 grand, year 3 it's 150. But the vision is your North Star. Where are you heading? If you sit in your car and you put your sat nav in, you're putting the end destination in. You're not necessarily putting, stop A, stop B along the way. So for me, the vision is the 3-year picture.
Okay, super. That makes sense. That's planning. That makes sense. Process was next, I think. Talk us through that one.
Process is really, again, trying to simplify it. It's a little bit like, this is where the ingredients look in. Recipes are ingredients and method. This just says, have a look at your business. So if we've accepted, we've set a destination, we've set some personal aspirations, and we're starting to put some 90-day objectives in, you need to look at the process you've got. So for me in there, it's only 2 segments in this piece for me, but it's key. One are your operating processes, and one is your customer experience. And you can flip them round. You can do customer experience first and then process. But basically it says, okay, you are telling yourself and everybody else, it might be colleagues, it might be stakeholders, it might be shareholders, where you're going. Customers normally in a small business, Paul, in the kind of sector we represent, clients come to agencies because they trust them in a specific niche, maybe a specific skill set. Sometimes it's just chemistry. But are your processes giving you the best chance of succeeding and achieving your aim? So the way in which you deal with inquiries, the way in which you send proposals and quotes out, more importantly, which is one of the things I think is missed very often, what is your sales process? Can you qualify? The number of people we speak to right now, Paul, where pipeline is a key concern. This is an area where you double down on your processes, you look at your processes, but remember, your processes should only be there to support the customer experience you wish to deliver.
And so how does that manifest when you are working with clients, or a client is working on the orbit then? Is it continuous improvement? Is it about prioritising which processes need most work, or documenting the processes?
It's all of those, Paul. Again, if one of the best explanations that was ever given to me when I presented this to somebody, and as I say, I like to think of it as the radar, this client said to me, well, that's a flywheel then. So it's a wheel. And what you're telling me is, as I go, and that's how they were visualizing year 1, year 2, year 3. Year 1 is I'm going to get all the pieces, the gears in the gearbox in place. And as I get it a little bit better, this wheel's going to go faster and faster. And then I've only got to tweak the things. So at that point, that's where continuous improvement is. In fact, segment 11 for me, Paul, is continuous improvement. If you put all the things in that you need, what's the extra effort to keep this thing going?
Okay, that makes sense. So bottom left then, as I'm visualising it, is people.
Yes.
And what are the subsections of that?
The subsections here are how we hire, and I'll come back to why how for me means more than who. The values and the principles, and then the learning and development. And the reason I tagged them in there is that recruitment process is key. So you and I both know, for example, at MAP, we do like values-driven recruitment. We like to assess people coming in. It's very often in a small business, growing a business, people look for experience. For example, okay, we've got our first blue chip client. We want to bring in account managers that have been in that space. The kind of account manager who comes into a small 20-person agency in Manchester may be very different to the person who's worked in an Ogilvy's or a large London agency. So it's about how we hire as well as who. So what is the process we have in place? Are we intentional about the decisions we make and the processes we follow of how we hire? It is a subsection potentially of operating processes, but to me, it's about how we do something. The values and principles then is how do you explain that to people? So I often say, the way in which MAP recruit, we recruit based on values. Yes, we appreciate and we love the diversity of our team, but there are some of our values that are common across everybody. And whilst some people might take caring more than being brave, it doesn't matter. There's an element of all those values inherent within every mapper. And so the way I like to explain it, Paula, values are what you come through the door with. Principles are how you deliver your service, how you become a team member, how you deal with your clients, etc. So the values and principles are how do we bring the values to life? How do we live our values every day? How do we demonstrate it, both internally and externally?
So you've brought up values twice now. So I think top right in the planning area was about the idealistic, I guess, what values matter to us. And now we're getting into the people. This is about now how do we find the people that match up against those values. So it's more about the execution here.
And it can actually be where you can choose to just have values here, Paul. The first one, the vision, is just, it's the destination. So the value is just the bit that says, if we're going to build a team around this vision, what are the values and principles those people need to, A, come in with, demonstrate, and then the link to learning and development, which is the next segment here, Paul, in this section, is what do we need to do to support our own vision and make, in our example, everybody the best mapper they can be. And that's where the development plans come in and the learning and career plans come into your planning.
That might have started to answer my next question, which was going to be, because this is such a key area, as we've said, with values, is what advice do you typically give to business owners, or mistakes do you see they make when, as we've seen, they've got a role to fill, but they've got values that they want to stick to as well, but there's work that needs to be done, and they need to get somebody in the door. So how do you help them to navigate that?
Sometimes, Paul, it's really difficult because it doesn't matter how many times I seek to share my experiences, and you will know in many of the times we've spoken, I'm the first to say, listen, let me show you how I made this mistake. I think it's really important to impart your knowledge of when you didn't get things right. And I'll be the first to say, Paul, I've made some horrendous recruitment decisions over my time. But when I reflect on that, it's because, as you just said there, I did a knee-jerk reaction. I did a stress-based decision based on sometimes desperation. We have a problem. We have a hole in our processes. That could be a business development sales role. How many agency owners do we speak to who say they've been chasing the new business salesperson for years, spent lots of money, didn't work. Or we find internally, very often as the agency grows, the principal needs to create or build some kind of management team, and very often that management layer is one of the first ones they'll get wrong, because they very often promote someone who's a great account manager doesn't make a great sales manager, because they can't often pass it on to everyone else how they did it. Sometimes, Paul, it's literally people believe it when they've lived their experience themselves. I think if we sat down with everybody who's had their business for, I'm going to say, 3 years or more, they would probably recognise one of these issues. But I do believe, whether it's me or anybody else, just sitting there and saying, I told you so, or this will happen, doesn't build trust, doesn't build value. I think it's about helping somebody make those errors. And sometimes the errors are the big learning opportunities, Paul.
And one of the things that we do, because you do it and you introduced it, is that final stage interview that you do that's values based. There's no CV, you don't look at the CV, you don't know anything about their record, their history in terms of what they've done or where they've come from. You are purely gauging them based on personality. I think that's really important. One, because you've got the experience, but two, because you're separate from the obsession to fulfill the role, if you like.
I think that's true, yes. I think the reality is that's something we've developed at MAP, but it's something I've done previously, which is trust the interviewing manager, is a phrase I would use, which is trust the person interviewing them that they've got somebody they believe can do the job. So that's where the CV comes in. Does this person have the skill and experience to deliver what we require them to do? Lots of people, if you only recruit on that, it only takes the one bad apple to destroy your culture. I tend to call them mood hoovers. You only need a mood hoover in the room and it can slow everything down. So the role that I play in that piece is the value-based interview. We have a series of questions that are based on MAP's values, the vision, your vision for the business, Paul, where you want to get it to, and where the values come in. And then we ask them questions about them as people, really. And it's just about deciding whether that person is going to fit with the rest of the team, because whilst, as I said earlier, we need individuals and we need people with different capabilities and capacities. They all need to be a certain type of person, for us to get the best out of them, but more importantly for me, Paul, for them to enjoy their work and gain fulfillment about being in our business. Yeah. And I would say that for everybody. One of the questions I say, what does it look like in a year's time? How will we know we've made the right decision? How will you know you've made the right decision? And it's very often interesting to get that view of where they think they fit into your business.
Yeah, obviously I like it, but it's a role fit as well as a values fit, both equally important, as you say, and having that separation has really, really helped us, because me and Amanda and others can be very close to the action, so really useful. So that's people then, thank you for that. The final one is performance, I think.
It goes into performance of the business, but I break that down, because ironically that's where I link through to people. So people performance is 9, business performance is 10, and continuous improvement is 11. So people performance is one that, again, I think lots of small businesses don't do this that well, Paul. We can help any business owner with a set of KPIs look at their business performance. So what are the numbers that you need on a monthly basis to make sure you're going in the right direction at the right speed? So we can all do that. But the people performance is, how do you make sure that you are measuring the delivery of the people against what you need, but also so they know. It's got to be two-way. We often speak with people who'll say, well, let's just talk about restructuring. In the last few years, we know of many organisations that have needed to go through restructuring, whether that was the restructuring that COVID forced upon them, furlough schemes, etc., or as they've come out of it, are they looking to downsize, upsize, pivot their business? And very often it's really difficult then, because they're trying to make subjective decisions, and very often they all love all the people they employ, but you've got to find a way that's fair and equitable to everybody to say, how can we make these decisions if push comes to shove? And I'm a big believer in having that open and transparent. Hopefully you'll never need it, but people performance is about people knowing their own trajectory. If we take a business like ours, Paul, it's helping those people understand they're in a qualified environment. How many exams have they got to do to get what they want to do? Is that this year? Is it next year? What career opportunities do they get by doing that? So it's a framework, really, and that's where people performance comes in. So it's quite easy for people to know that they are being measured in a fair and equitable way, and the business can measure the performance of those people.
We often talk about it in MAP about taking the surprises away.
Yeah.
So often, obviously, you have probation periods. You have them for a reason. But when it gets to the end of someone's probation period and they sit down for that meeting, it shouldn't be all that daunting. It shouldn't be all that shocking or uncertain. It should be quite very clear at that stage as to whether they're performing or not, because you've made it really clear at the start what the objectives are. You've continued to remind them throughout that period, and you've tracked their performance against that and talked to them and tried to help them as best as you can against that. But that doesn't just stop at probation, does it? That's making sure that we're both on the same page. There's no surprise when one day you think you're performing really well and I tell you I think you're performing badly, because we should have been tracking the same things and looking at the same information together and having those open and honest conversations.
It's absolute that, Paul. It's also look at it from the team members, from the colleagues' point of view. How many times do we find out that a member of a client business has left because they didn't see the career opportunity they thought was there? So I also think it's important that they can see where they are and they can see where they fit in. You go back all the way back to the start, Paul. It's important that everybody in the business sees where they fit into the vision, because they've come in and they've bought that vision in the interviewing process very often, and we tend to forget that when people have been in the business for a year or two.
And it's again about being honest with them there. I think is that as a small business you can't make out that you are the be all and end all and you have every opportunity for every single person. Like, there's only so many opportunities, so sometimes it's about being realistic with that person about maybe that they might come to the end of their tenure and they might hit a glass ceiling because there's only so many roles, so many things available in the business.
Absolutely. I also think we have to be realistic in, let's go back to the concept of capital versus lifestyle, Paul. Very often in the lifestyle business, I would suggest that one of the things you want is consistency, and you want continuity of your team and all the rest of it, because it's about making that delivery repeatable year on year. If you look at very often the trajectory of a capital focused business, that is about this difference between startup and scale up. And the team that you may have needed to get your business up and running, in my experience, never going to be the same team that you need to go to the next level. And so one of the challenges that an owner's going to face if they decide that they're a capital focused business are the sacrifices they're going to make to get the outcome that they want. And they often think that means themselves, I need to work longer, I need to not have holidays, all that kind of things. I don't agree with any of that, but that's how people often see it. But I will also say to them, but what about your team? Let's give a real example of, very often, one of the reasons an opportunity or a client, an agency will come to MAP is that they need help to get them to the next level on their journey. They need us to help them, give them a better level of financial acumen, or to use your phrase, financial confidence, Paul. And sometimes that can be at the cost of the mother-in-law who does the books, or whatever it is. It's that kind of reality and being clear about the things that you need to get to the next level to get you where you want to get to.
And again, like we talked about last time we spoke, it's what might a buyer look for. You know, you might be perfectly comfortable with the fact that your mother-in-law is not a qualified bookkeeper and sometimes doesn't update the books for a couple of weeks. You might be willing to make that compromise, but a buyer is not. So I think that's one of the key things between the lifestyle and capital when it comes to people, is you might make compromises that somebody else wouldn't make.
Totally, Paul. I think it's a really interesting angle, a really important point, and we've seen that very often in some of the due diligence work that we do. So the lifestyle owner is happy and accepts. They get what they need because they want what they need and they get the service that they want. But somebody else looking at it is going to say, hang on a minute, I need this to be entirely different. I need this to be managed in a certain way and by a certain level of person. And so that is very often the discord and the difference between the capital team and the lifestyle team.
It's triggering lots of thoughts to me now, but it could also be like just the way they like. I like using this accounting system, or I like just doing it on spreadsheets, for example. It's if they like that and it's a lifestyle business, then crack on. If that's what you enjoy, don't let anybody else tell you there's a different way, a better way, because who are they to tell you when it's your business and you're trying to enjoy
Absolutely,
it?
Paul.
But it might suffer if you're looking to build a capital event and somebody else has their eyes on it. Yeah.
You spoke recently about the importance of the sales process in that, for that reason, that if somebody is looking to acquire your business, they want to believe that the sales process is robust enough to be able to be done very, very often without you as the principal in the kind of businesses we represent, but also something that's solid and scalable and repeatable. Lots of people recognise, and we do this kind of strategic orbit work, Paul, with them, is they recognise that there is absolute correlation and interdependency between all these segments. Any one of these segments probably doesn't justify itself in isolation and absolutely doesn't work with the reason I have it like the wheel or the spider's web. It comes back to the middle. Everything has to interconnect.
I'm sort of seeing it as sellable versus enjoyable as well. So the sales process might be something that the business owner really enjoys, and therefore just being mindful of that. Am I holding on to that because I enjoy it, which is a red flag and a danger if you're looking to sell your business, but perfectly the right thing to do if you're looking to keep your business.
Totally.
It's just being self-aware, isn't it? Or you might dislike that area, but you're willing to do it because you need to get the business to a certain size to sell. Whereas if you dislike it and you want a lifestyle business, you might be thinking, well, how do I engineer this differently?
I also think, Paul, it comes back to be really clear on what it is you want. So you've given a great example there of where people sometimes make, I'm going to say, misaligned decisions. So somebody who has the lifestyle business vision, they want this business to give them, let's just say, an example is, I wish to extract X amount out of this business. I wish to maximise my pension contributions for 10 years, and that's my plan. And then they get a lot of pressure about growing the business. And they go, okay, well, if I could get somebody else to do what I do in the sales process, if two of us are doing it, it'll get twice as many clients. Often doesn't then work. And therefore you go back and say, but why did you take yourself out of that process, to use the process you were discussing? Which is, but you're great, you enjoy this, you're great at this. Clients love the fact that they are buying from the principal. We see that so often in the agency space. And then in the pursuit of growth, they put somebody else in there. Not only have they spent a lot of money, they've gone backwards. So it comes back to being really, my point on interconnectability, Paul, is the decision you're taking truly in line with your vision? If it's not, just give yourself some time, count to 10 and rethink it.
So we just did people performance, I think. There's more aspects to the performance.
Well, I'm going to say what we do every month for people, Paul. So business performance is, how do you provide the business owner with the information and the metrics, the key metrics suited to their business that they can see are being measured. So if we took our standard page 3 of a management accounts pack KPI sheet, what were your sales? And then dependent on the services that client needs or wants, are we tracking against last month, last year? Are we tracking against a budget? So are you up or down against your plan on sales? How much were those sales worth? How much profit did you make? In terms of absolute pounds, in terms of percentage numbers. And then I'd like to see a line that says, great, so that was last month. How does that make us look cumulatively? So year to date, are we up or down? Go back to what we said earlier. Am I sat in the sheds at half time, 1-0 down or 1-0 up? Does that change where I'm going with this? And then really importantly for me, the measures of equity, cash, and debtor management, debtor days. They are the key elements for me. They're the minimum requirements, I should say. There are things that are more important if you're trying to achieve a certain trajectory, but they are the minimum measurements that somebody should have to be able to tell you and exhibit to themselves they are managing and measuring the performance of their business.
And I think what's often overlooked here, Stuart, in this area is business owners will talk about all those non-financial KPIs, leading KPIs, all of the other things that they've been told they need to measure as part of the business, which is all true. But the reality is most of the time they can't produce a monthly set of financial statements that tells them the basics. And until that they've got that foundational basic data, you can't then start to move into some of these other layers. So I often talk about getting your monthly cadence right, your monthly governance, a set of accounts that you can believe in, that are produced quickly, and then start to layer those other KPIs on top of it. And what about when you say about business performance and comparing against something, the idea of budgeting and forecasting, looking ahead, would that come in this bit in terms of understanding what future performance looks like, or would that come in the 3190 or somewhere else, or does it not matter?
Well, again, Paul, go back to my point of interconnectivity. It is in both, but this comes, for me, that comes in the 11th section, which is continuous improvement. So if we've got these things in place, so I'm going to link now budget and forecast. So we're in this year, so we're in ground zero, we're in year one, we have a budget for this year. So let's do a really silly example. I want to get to £3 million of sales in 3 years. Year one's £1 million, year two's £2 million, year three's £3 million. Okay, so how do I make sure that if I'm going to where I need to be, I need to start forecasting and seeing my sales increase? Very rare someone's going to finish the year on £1 million and the next year do £2 million. We often talk about the exit run rate. So where are you getting to? What's the speed you started to get to? What velocity are you creating in your monthly revenue cycles? Because if you can show that suddenly you're doing more than 80 grand a month, then you know that you're on track to break the £1 million barrier. And so it's about putting those things in there to be able to say, okay, what does my forecasting look like? I also think forecasting is really key because it's also a measurement of how realistic are your aims and how solid are all your foundations to help you deliver it. We often will hear a client or somebody say to us, I don't go into forecasting much. It's not my forte. I just think it's stargazing. And that may be true. But if you're looking at something that says we're going into that year two, or we're finishing this year, we're going to double our sales next year, and you're looking at a pipeline that's absolutely flat, then something would say, hang on a minute, before we embarrass ourselves, are we sure about this growth rate? And there's nothing wrong, Paul, but coming back and saying, okay, maybe it's not 2 million this year, maybe it's 1.5. What does that look like? And that comes back to where we started this conversation. Does that change what your 3-year plan looks like? Or does it say, hang on a minute, this is probably a 4-year plan or a 5-year plan, and that's fine. But the forecasting to me is a key barometer of, are you going in the right direction at the pace required to get where you want to get to?
And you mentioned there about updating the plan, which brings me on to my next question, which is, when would you do this exercise? So is it a time of the year, financial year, calendar year? Is it depending on what's happening in your life? Is it just when you start your business? So when would you do this exercise? And then how often would you come back to it and update it and review it?
I think it comes back to the circumstances you're in, Paul. So the best example I can give, and you've seen me do this before, I've carried this one around for a number of years now. So this was October 2015. I was investing in an agency in Manchester, was sitting there looking at, if I want to do this, what does the owner want and need over the next few years? What do I want? And we put together that plan that said, okay, what's the objective? So it has to say the objective is to create X within 3 years. This one happened to be an enterprise value. It doesn't always have to be that. It can be options for shareholders. It could be a perfect lifestyle. It doesn't matter what the objective is, but there needs to be an objective. So it can start anywhere, Paul. It's just about when's the right time to do it. If you wanted the perfect timing, it'd be brilliant if everyone started their business like this, but that doesn't happen. I think if you're looking at the kind of cadence that we get involved in with clients, it's either at that annual review stage, it's when you're starting to put a budget together. I would suggest that if you're I'm going to coin a phrase here, first-time budgeteer. I don't even know if that even exists.
It does now.
So if you're why are you doing that budget? And I would question, should that budget be done in isolation if it's not linked to a 2-3 year vision? So it's at the time when you need it, Paul. There's never a bad time to do this, in my opinion. The wrong decision is to delay it and look for the perfect time. We won't start this, or we'll wait until we see what the year end looks like. Year end comes along, and then it takes 6 months, sometimes up to 9 months to get your accounts finalised. So there's never a bad time to start it, just don't leave it.
And then where and how does it show up then? You've got that 10-year-old bit of paper in your hand now. How often did you get that back out? How often did you look at it? How did you review it? Who with? What did that process look like?
In this absolute case, Paul, this came back to working with David Arden at the time as my finance partner. I was a client of Matt's, and it was about sitting there, and when we were setting annual budgets and targets, was it still in line with this plan? And did the plan need to change? So in this rough instance, my 12 o'clock spine was years going out, year 1, year 2, year 3, and it was putting down the level of sales revenue we wanted. And then on some of the other spokes or spines, whichever way you see it, it was, okay, what does that relate to in terms of new business clients? How many new business clients do we need to bring in? There was also a spoke in there around profit margin. So if we go back to the way in which most of agencies are sold, they're sold on a multiple of EBITDA. So one of the ways to increase the enterprise value of that business was to increase the profitability. More importantly, have an absolute focus on profitability. That business had been very successful for 15 years, but to be very clear about what the owner wanted at that point was we needed to be more intentional about the next 5 years.
And I think the way that I see it as well is it is a live and interactive wheel. Nothing is ever set in stone. Even your vision and values, potentially, they're probably the ones that are least likely to change.
The reason I put the 3190, Paul, is it gives you that cadence of checking it. So I'm a big believer in holding sometimes, and as well as the monthly board meeting, have a quarterly strategy meeting where it allows you to discuss different points. And very often, if necessary, the agenda, rather than a agenda that we may see that will change every month in a board meeting, the agenda is your strategic orbit. And the 3190 is very simple. In each of those sectors, can you set an objective for 90 days? Let's go back to how we hire. It might be, how often do we see people talking about the pressure to fill a vacancy? And so in that space, it might vary from, we need to have this person, we need this new business salesperson within the next 90 days. It might be, before we do that, in the next 90 days, we actually need to make sure we've got a values-based interview process set up. It may be, we need to start identifying the market that's out there, the opportunities, etc., etc. But it's just, you can set an objective in any one of these sectors to be as significant or as small as they need to be, just to keep you going along. The trick is, if you can review everything on every 90 days, because very often the mistakes I see made are, let's just carry on with recruitment. Somebody needs to fill a vacancy, and then you find out that even the offer letter going out is outdated. How many times do we see it where the contract of employment was actually, well, the last time we offered somebody a job was 5 years ago, and the contract of employment is not up to date? Examples like that, Paul.
It's almost like separating the business as usual from the strategic objectives. I think I see it.
The way I would ask people to think of it is, you often talk about wearing two hats, and you talk about, are you the owner, are you the operator? Are you the director? Are you the shareholder? And I'll sit here and say, this is a shareholder conversation. So we can act as a board of directors, the board meets the board meeting, but the strategy meetings, whatever that frequency might be, we know people who are comfortable to do it annually. We know people who are comfortable with it twice a year. Ourselves, we will do it every 3 months. But it's about sitting there as shareholders in that one and looking at it where you can, hands off, a little bit at distance, arm's length, saying, okay, objectively, are we measuring this to get where we want to get to, forgetting the day-to-day stress and strains? I know it's not easy, but it's important.
Is there anyone that you think wouldn't be suitable for doing a strategic orbit? So are there any circumstances whereby you think this is overkill or it wouldn't be valuable?
Personality driven, Paul. There are lots of fantastic, particularly in our space, there are lots of fantastic creative agency owners, and part of their drive, their purpose, their why, their fulfillment is all about creativity. Very often it's even about a style, a fad, a trend. And sometimes if you're asking a very creative person to knuckle down on the detail and the plan behind that business and look forward 3 to 5 years, you can sometimes just have a personality clash. One of the questions I often ask people, they'll ask for our opinion on whether they should be a capital or a lifestyle focused business. And I would revert that question and say, but understand yourself as a person. What is your personality? Are you the kind of person that likes to make changes, go off the beaten path, whatever phrase we want to use? Or do you find comfort in the plan. If you find comfort in the plan, and that gives you your confidence, this is great for you. If you don't find comfort in the plan, this can be a distraction. And we have to be honest and say to everybody, we only care about the value it gives you in your business. This is not about whether you buy this service from MAP, it's about whether this adds value in your business. And I have worked with a number of clients where we've sat down and said, look, this is probably not in your best interests. This is not how you operate. This does not suit your personality. So I think it's important for transparency that that's out there as well. If you find comfort in a plan, it'll be your best friend. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want to be held accountable, wants to have free reign every time, I've had people say to me, I think this is holding back my creative juices.
Like you say, personality, it's the lifestyle be capital is not necessarily a distinguisher as to whether to do this or not, because lots of people that live a lifestyle business want it to be planned. They want to have clarity, and this is a great tool for them as well. So
this on a lifestyle business, Paul, this is the barometer they need to go, how can I make sure that this is ticking along nicely to give me the life I want? And it's a simple way of doing that. Yeah. And it's not allowing all the opportunities to come along, take you off that lifestyle plan. Because very often there will be lots of people in this space. This is how you build a business to sell. Exit focus. That's not what everybody wants. Go back to the very first point, Paul. If you are clear on your vision, this is a tool to help you visualize those ambitions and goals.
Yeah.
If you don't have that ambition and goal, this is a waste of time.
Yeah. Helping you to say no is the way I always like to look at these things as well. Is I see the satisfaction and the relief from a lot of people when we work through this with them, and other things when we go through the budgeting and some of the aspects within this as well. That's all I need to do. Not that it's easy, but I now know that anything that fits outside of this agreement, these terms of business that I'm willing to work to, is just a distraction. It's not easy, but the things that are on this page are the only thing that matter to me. Anything that's not already on there, doesn't fuel that, is a distraction. And I think if you're looking at how a business is operating day to day, as you said before, because this is interactive, it's not to judge somebody that they are acting outside of this and say you're acting on the wrong things. It's either that they're doing the wrong things or the plan is outdated, isn't it?
Totally.
So are we updating the plan to be more in line with what you're actually doing day to day, or have they become distracted by different things? So it's not judgmental, it's just helping them to be very conscious about the decision making.
It's absolutely that, Paul. It's about conscious, it's about intentional. We go back to when you and I first started this podcast, we spoke about the concept of intentional and then consequential and circumstantial decision making. This just helps you to be more intentional. One of the reasons I often talk about the radar is if you're talking year 2 and year 3 out, just put some things in there. I'm going to use an example that we hear very often. A secondary office, a London-based office, wherever it is, we hear that very often. Stick it on there. You don't need to worry about it. But at what point are you going to consider that as a decision before it becomes too late? So there are very fixed things in there that we can stick on the spine, year 1, year 2, year 3. This is the revenue we want, and then we can put the soft things around it. Developing a senior leadership team is one of the things I often see in there. We often see things such as EMI schemes put in there. It's not that you need to make a decision on it now, whether it's lifestyle, whether you want to get a team in so you can, when I say exit, I don't mean sell, I mean you can go and live in your holiday home somewhere or whatever it is. Then it's about having the things. At what point in the future that's why I use the phrase, does this need to come on my radar?
It reminds me of that idea of people who struggle to sleep at night because they've got 101 ideas. Write them down before you go to bed, because it's like you've offloaded it from your brain then, and you've said it's in the parking lot. I'm not ignoring it. I'm just not addressing it right now. I'm going to address it when the time's right to give it the focus and attention it deserves. Totally. And it's on a piece of paper to make sure that we don't miss it. What would be your advice in terms of next steps? So someone's listened to this today, they've got some ideas, they like the idea of being more intentional, they like the idea of having a plan to work towards. Where would you advise they get started on this exercise?
Just talk to us, Paul. Just understand what strategy means to you and your business. I'm not here saying that this model is perfect. I'm here saying that I successfully built I happened to choose to sell, Paul. They were capital decisions for me, not lifestyle decisions. But I successfully built and sold 2 agencies using this model. So all I can say is, let me show you how it worked for me. Let me show you the errors I made. But it doesn't mean this is the only around.
Super. That makes a lot of sense, Stuart. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to speaking to you all again soon.